Hi, hello. Welcome back to the HII Method. My name is Jen Hatz. I am the host of the HII Method podcast and the founder of the HII Method, a holistic, integrative, and innovative approach to assessing and optimizing human health, well-being, and performance. And I am partnered with Neuroforce One, a human performance company that has been churning out champions for years. They have both in-person or in-facility training and assessments for athletes, as well as remote options available. And I'm excited to bring you all back to the HII Method podcast once again for the topic of hydration, because this is a really big topic. And if you picked up on the last episode, there's a whole lot of positive energy that I'm throwing out there about hydration. And for good reason. It's something that we need to, see in this new light, maybe a new enlightened light, with a more optimistic and positive outlook on it. And the reason for that are really, just something I gotta throw out there, that anytime there's a whole lot of positive energy and optimism about something, there's probably an equal amount of shadow work behind the scenes that had to be done in order to see it in that way. And not to make light of a psychology joke there, but in reality, the reason why I have such a strong optimistic and positive outlook on hydration, the reason why it is the absolute driving force for everything that I do, and why I get so insanely passionate about hydration as a general topic and really as the main priority for how to just address health, well-being, and performance in general, as well as for the individual. This is always my priority. It's number one. It's something that I take pride in prioritizing. And the reason for that is because I have come face to face repeatedly over the years, both personally and professionally, with the shadow side of it, with the dark side of it, with the actual reality, the actual life and death reality that happens, like quite literally the life and death reality that happens when hydration is not prioritized, when it is not truly understood, and when it's not fully respected for what it needs to be respected for, or how to best respect it. I think there's been far too much gray area, far too much acceptance of what has always been, and not enough questioning if what we've always known is all there is to know. And quite frankly, that was what I had to come face to face and figure out. I kind of learned it the hard way, but that helped enlighten me to things that I never truly understood before. And that's why I am so diligent about bringing this forth for others, because I know for a fact that this is not being taught in the standard curriculum. I know for a fact that this is not a topic being discussed or being implemented in households, in programs where there is a coach and athlete dynamic. Anywhere where you have a potential to positively impact your own health, well-being, and performance, or that of another, this needs to be the absolute cornerstone, the absolute driving force behind anything that you are doing, because it is so insanely critical. I cannot stress this enough, and that's why I'm going to continue to stress it throughout this entire podcast. I'm so excited for you guys to listen even further to it. But so I want to kind of take us back a little bit. We're going to go through a little shadow work here. Again, not to make light of like a psychology joke here, but it is real. I want to display for you guys, just kind of walk you through a little bit of some of the darker side of it, some of the scarier experiences that I've witnessed, that I've been a part of, things that have happened for me and to me personally and professionally, in order for me to accumulate this knowledge over time, because this is why I'm so dead set on sharing it. So just to kind of walk you through a little bit of some personal and professional history of why hydration is why it matters so dang much. So I spent a number of years working specifically with college football. That was my thing. That was my bread and butter. That was as a sports dietitian, I felt so strongly drawn to football, and specifically at the collegiate level. And there's probably a number of factors, for me personally, that it was my college years when I was making the most massive changes in my life. going through experiences in order to make massive positive improvements. And so I think because that personal little chunk of time in my life was so monumental, that I feel drawn towards that population specifically, because it's like, if you could be that positive influence for someone when they're going through that time of life, it's like that could make or break the entire trajectory of their future. So I felt very strongly that I was drawn towards that population for a reason. And oddly enough, I mean, I don't really believe in coincidence. I believe that everything happens for a reason, and everything ends up being connected. You just have to know how to connect the dots, right? A lot of times we have to look backwards and connect the dots. We don't always see it moving forwards. But at the time when I was interviewing for different positions, there was a program that part of the interview process, they all were expressing the exact same concern that was widespread within this program for years. And the entire, the entire basis for every interview I had with every department, they all were mentioning the exact same problem. They said, we have been having these long-standing cramping issues across the team for years, and we can't figure it out. It's been, any time of the year, any time of season. It's not relative to the weather. It's all across the team, so it's not a specific position group. And it's been happening for years, which years in collegiate football means you're talking about roster changes over the years. So that's hundreds of athletes. And you're talking about staff turnover, because staff turnover is a very real reality in just sports in general, but especially in college football. You're getting a high turnover rate of staff. So you're talking about hundreds of athletes over the years and dozens at least of staff turnover over the years. And for them to have a continual problem that there is no, from what they're saying, there is no rhyme or reason. It's any time of year, so it's not particular to the weather. It's any position group, so it's not particular to movement patterns. And it's all across the board, all athletes, no matter what type of a coach-athlete dynamic there is, because there's this staff turnover and roster changes over the years. All of this is happening for years and years and years. And they're like, we just can't figure it out. And I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. So that immediately became my thing that I focused on for that team, for that program. I was like, this is a problem for this program. It has been a problem and no one can solve it. So this is what I need to do. I need to focus on solving this problem. So first, immediately, I already knew, talking to all these people and hearing what they have to say about how it's this unsolvable thing. I'm like, okay, well, nothing is unsolvable. There's a common denominator somewhere. So we just got to identify it. So as soon as I get into the program and start working with the athletes, start seeing and just observing the athlete and coach dynamics that were going on, the athlete to athlete dynamics going on, I saw immediately the first common denominator was the fact that it was an attitude or belief about hydration, about water, and about cramping. So to bring this back a little bit, so the attitude or belief system that they had throughout the entire program culture stemmed from really an absence of focusing on hydration and really viewing water as a bad thing. There was an athlete that at one point when I was telling him, you got to drink more water, and he made a comment that, well, water makes you weak. I'm like, ooh, we got an outdated belief system here that we got to start to break down. So immediately knowing that it's a perception that, oh, well, I'm already hydrated because I'm so-and-so said I'm hydrated, so I'm fine. Or I don't want to drink water because I don't like the way it tastes. Or doesn't water make you weak? Or just flat out refusing to take drinks, to take a sip of a drink when they're on the field because they don't want the coach to see them taking a drink, because it was deemed as this unnecessary luxury to take a drink on the field. And I'm like, ooh, we got some layers of psychology to start unfolding here. So luckily, having a psych background, I knew how to kind of unpack this stuff and start implementing some behavior change techniques, knowing that it was going to take time, that I can't just come right in and immediately try to, blow everything up and tell everyone like, you got to change everything, because that's not going to work. So instead, taking a slower, steady approach and starting to identify, first of all, where the attitude and belief system, where that's kind of stemming from? What's the core belief here? And how do we start implementing gradual changes across the program and across how the athletes and across how the personnel, the staff, the coaches, how they're viewing and understanding what it means to be hydrated, what it means to actually have enough fluid intake, and the differences in fluids, that there is a massive difference between the water that is out there on the field and the sports drink that is out there on the field. There's a massive difference between them. Don't just offer them as if they're the same thing, because they're not. So there were a lot of factors that were kind of always at play. It's almost like playing a real complicated game, like playing chess or something, where it's like you have to have a real clear strategy overall, and you have to have kind of a sense of patience, knowing that like, okay, this is the small move I'm going to make now for the sake of making these improvements for these individuals, and I'm going to stick with this strategy over time. And over the course of, it was about 3 months when I was making these slight changes around the facility, slight changes around which fluids were being offered, and slight changes in how I approach the conversation or just the verbal cues, anything to get the conversation going about hydration. Because at that point in time, I was not yet allowed to be able to just have a open talk to the team. It was that outdated of a belief system that my place with the team was seen as like going into the kitchen kind of a thing. It was pretty outdated. We'll say that. I don't want to get too far into that, but pretty outdated belief systems about everything, but especially about, what I could possibly do for the team. So that being said, so after a few months of implementing these changes over and over, during the course of this time, making, small adjustments and really building trust and building a thick foundation of, I think, confidence and competency for myself, being able to promote this change in behavior. So during that time, I was doing every ounce of research that I needed to do to understand the different working parts here of not only the attitude and belief system, but why is it still prevalent now, even despite the athlete and staff turnover? So that's where I found the other common denominator across this program. And it wasn't until we were starting camp. So we were, when you start football camp, you're in the heat, right? Doesn't even matter where you live. Does not matter what part of the country you live in. You're in heat, like it's heat. And it's hot and humid, and you have athletes that are in pads, so that's retaining all your body heat. You have a helmet on, which is retaining heat coming that normally would be, releasing from your head. No, it's all contained in there. So you have some real dangerous conditions at play. And so I was grateful that I had at least that time during summertime to start implementing changes for hydration. But then once I saw the other common denominator, that there was this belief system that, first of all, that cramping was this elusive, mysterious thing. And there was this belief that, the cramping must be related to some neuromuscular thing because we've already got hydration figured out. And I said, well, no, you don't. So first we're going to figure out hydration, because the cramping is absolutely coming from hydration. And it's also coming from attitude and belief. But so once we started implementing that side of the equation, I saw the other side of the equation, and it was this belief that that the athletes and that the personnel working with the athletes, that they could try to manipulate hydration in a way to prevent cramping or to treat cramping, but it was through a very dangerous means. And so what I mean by that, within this team, and especially within the team culture for years, the athletes were receiving IV fluids, as if it was the same thing as the hydration tactics that you would use on a day-to-day basis. And they were receiving IVs really for no other reason than the belief that the IV fluid, that the IV itself, was going to somehow make up for their hydration behaviors, that it was going to somehow treat muscle cramping and somehow prevent muscle cramping. So I was witnessing IVs IV fluids being administered to athletes immediately before and even during their time when they were on the field playing. So I'm going to get into, in a separate episode, the entire physiology behind that and why that is a absolute massive no. That is a massive, critical, life and death no, you do not do that, period. I'm going to explain all of that in detail with all the physiology behind that of why that is a massive no. But just for the sake of what I'm explaining right now, IV fluids are absolutely not a safe and easily acceptable normalized hydration tactic. It is a medical intervention that is used in times when you are not able to take in fluids, meaning you are sick or incapacitated, you are in surgery, something where you're not able to take in fluids, or if you have been so deeply dehydrated, you have lost so much fluid from your system that your blood volume is low and you aren't able to take in fluids orally fast or efficient enough for your blood volume to get back up to normal. Those are the only two times that anyone who is a physically active, normal, healthy person would ever require an IV fluid administration. It is in no way, shape, or form doing anything to optimize your hydration status or to make up for your hydration behaviors during the week or to prevent or treat cramping. It's not doing any of that. So just get that, if anything, that's the message here, that it is absolutely not designed for exercise physiology, period. But on top of that, because you have individuals who are engaging in exercise physiology is in itself an entire field of study. And the act of adding fluids through an IV fluid administration places the exercising individual at a massive risk for a cardiovascular event. I'm just going to say that right now. I'm not going to go into any further details yet because there is an entire huge story that you are going to hear very soon. I'm going to release it on the podcast very soon, where I'm explaining the physiology, what's happening with your physiology when you receive IV fluids, but then what happens as that major cardiovascular risk for an exercising individual who has received IV fluids immediately before or during exercise at a maximum capacity. That's maximum effort exercise, receiving IV fluids. Absolute no. And I know that as soon as I say that, that's going to spark some interest in people, because this behavior, this action, believe it or not, is it's blindingly normalized and accepted across the field, across the industry, across sports, depending on the sport, depending on the program. It could be so insanely normalized and accepted that it is never once questioned. It is never once viewed as a potential risk or the extent or severity of risk, because, well, this is what we've always done. Why wouldn't we do this? This is what we do. We're hydrated. No. And this is where the importance really for me of expressing all of this openly is, because we need to start really cracking the layers of those outdated beliefs, because they are placing individuals at risk right now. Right now, there are absolutely practitioners working with individuals who are engaging in what you could deem medical malpractice for no other reason than misinformation. They're following along with misinformation that they were given at some point in time and they never questioned. So really the big picture here is we got to start identifying what we know or what we think we know and start questioning it. Start asking those a critical analysis of what we know. Like, is this actually true? Is this actually what I should be doing? Is there a better way? Or am I just doing this because this is what's always been done? And in this case with this program, if you're doing the same thing repeatedly over and over, and you're telling me that you have this mysterious unknown thing that you can't figure out, then why in the world are you not questioning what you're doing about it? In this case, what you're doing about it is in fact the mystery. That is in fact the problem leading to the mystery. You're doing the same thing and you're expecting different results. we all know we all know the definition of insanity, right? You are quite literally engaging in the same thing over and over as this intervention or as this prevention tool or as this hydration tactic. And then you're wondering why you have this ongoing issue, but you never put two and two together. So that's why we need to have these conversations, because this is happening. This is happening. And it's not only at that one program, this is happening across the board. And it's not just this exact thing that is happening. This type of dynamic is happening everywhere. So I think it's important that we embrace questioning, we embrace the curiosity, and we be open to learning new things and developing our understanding of things. And really, if anything, that you are learning for the sake of understanding and listening for the sake of understanding, right? And not just trying to learn something in order to memorize materials so that you can regurgitate it out. No, learn to understand things. So I know I just said a whole lot. So like I said, I'm going to talk in depth about what that IV risk is and specifically how it relates to exercise physiology. I'm going to give that as its own nice packaged up deal, as its own episode, because it deserves to be its own episode. But what I want to highlight here is that there is not only some outdated beliefs that we may need to question, but that there might be behaviors that even you could be engaging in without realizing it that may not be best for you and that may actually be posing a greater risk for you. So, still talking about the topic of hydration. What I talked about last time was how there are some behaviors some beliefs that are not hydration, some behaviors that are not really doing much to help hydration. And there's also some ways to try to identify hydration, and then others that maybe are less realistic, less efficient, we shouldn't place all of our eggs in that basket kind of a thing. So back to the topic of hydration and why it is so important. As if I didn't stress it enough, it is so absolutely critical. It is life and death, and it is completely individualized to the person. So what your friend or your parent or your partner or your neighbor is doing or not doing is not necessarily relevant to you. And when I say that, we're going to talk about what's not hydration and maybe what you might be doing without realizing that you're doing it. So what we don't want to focus on, and what you may be doing without realizing that maybe it's not helping you, is the concept of replacing fluids that you lost through sweat, or just replacing fluids, or just, taking it and replacing. That can help for you to identify what you're taking in and how much of that is actually being retained. So if there is anything to take away from that, tracking your intake all throughout the day and being mindful of not only how much you're taking in fluid, but also being mindful of, let's say, how often you're using the restroom, how often you are urinating. If you are urinating about every 2 hours or less, then you're probably, and I say probably, in a good position, depending on how much your intake is. So your intake needs to be where it needs to be. It needs to be at least the minimum plus more. If you are urinating every 2 hours or less, then you might be starting to achieve that good balance, right? So that's the first layer. If you are urinating, if it's longer than 2 hours between the times that you're urinating, it's not enough. You need to take in more, period. But, so once we get that kind of like first layer of the balancing act there. So hopefully you're looking at the color of your urine, because who doesn't want to see the color of their urine? But it's an indicator of what your kidneys are doing. So that's kind of the next layer of what we can focus on, is like, okay, are my kidneys pushing out excess fluid, or are my kidneys retaining a lot of fluid and pushing out excess stuff? And the way you can identify that is from the color of your urine. So if every time you're going to the bathroom and you pee and it is clear, that's not good. Not necessarily good. It means that your kidneys are pushing out excess water out of your system, which could mean that you are taking in too much water compared to electrolytes. So that's where you would zoom out to that first layer of the balancing act and identify, okay, I've been tracking everything I'm taking in. How much water am I taking in and how much electrolytes am I taking in? Do I need to cut back on water? Do I need to add more electrolytes? Which side of the equation do I need to focus on, so that way when I pee, it's not completely clear? So that's how you kind of start to assess the layers of tracking there. Now, if you pee and it is really dark, and when I say dark, I mean like an apple juice color or darker. If it's a lemonade color or lighter, then you're probably in a good range for your kidney function. If it's darker, like an apple juice or darker, that means that your kidneys are doing their job to retain water and to push out excess stuff out of you in order to balance your blood concentration. So your blood is what is the critical component for your hydration status. That is what is most critical, because that is where adverse hydration status at your blood level is what leads to that cardiovascular event. I'm going to keep hinting at this topic because this is a major topic. So the change of your hydration status at the blood level is what leads to that cardiovascular risk. And it can also lead to a brain risk. That is what we don't want to do. So we want our blood level to be optimized, and your body is going to do that as effectively as it can. In this case, your kidneys are going to help filter your blood and push out what is not needed in order to protect your heart and protect your brain. So your kidneys are probably doing a good job. We hope that you have healthy, functioning kidneys that are doing their job. But when you start paying attention to the color of the urine content, the color of the urine that your kidneys are pushing out, that can give you a good indicator that maybe there's something going on with your blood concentration that we can start to look at. Okay, what is within my control, that outer layer? What am I tracking that I'm taking in? What can I change, or what can I do from my own behaviors of what's within my control, so that way my blood concentration is where it needs to be, so that my urine concentration looks like a nice, lovely lemonade or lighter color. So just think of it like that, like different layers of what you can control, what your body's prioritizing, and then how we identify different indicators of where we're at. So some of the things, though, that I have seen, and why I really was getting very worried when I was with this program and seeing some of the behaviors, was it wasn't just that there was this attitude and belief about hydration, that they're properly hydrated, that water makes you weak, that, that cramping is this elusive thing that no one can figure out. No, we got to cover all that. And then the IV fluid administration. I'll cover that in a separate, like I keep talking about it as a separate episode. I'm going to cover it in a separate episode, I promise. But so that is its own beast, right? In between there were also regular behaviors that were happening that needed to be addressed in order to kind of capture the big theme of correcting the misinformation. So some of those other behaviors, and these are behaviors that I believe strongly are also some behaviors that people are engaging without realizing how it might be skewing their hydration status. It's skewing their overall attitude and belief about hydration. And this was, in this case, especially with football, weighing your body weight before and after you work out for the sake of identifying that you've lost something. You've lost fluid in some way. You've lost stored up energy. Stored up energy also carries weight. And you've lost this during the workout. So you've identified that there's been a loss of something during the workout by taking your body weight before and after workout. Some of the things that I was seeing, though, was that a coach was using your pre-workout body weight, or even your post-workout body weight, using that difference, or using your weight in general as a reason to reprimand or punish you, as if you were doing something wrong. There is absolutely nothing that you are doing right or wrong when it comes to what your body weight is as a number. It's just what your mass is on the scale. It's not showing anything about who you are as a person or indicating anything about your lifestyle choices. So we need to remove that layer of belief that someone weighing in light or losing a lot during practice is somehow some negative thing on them as a person. It's not. It's a change in mass. It's telling us something. It's indicating something about what your body is doing and how your body's handling what is being done to you, right? It's your body's showing us that it's responding in some way to something. So what I was seeing, though, was that some athletes felt pressured to make weight and they would start chugging a bunch of fluids right before they stepped on the scale because they were so afraid that if they weighed in light, it would be disastrous for them, that it would be a punishable offense for weighing in light. That's not reality. Nor is punishing an athlete or trying to implement some sort of a negative connotation to losing weight before and after practice, because that's something that is not within your control. You cannot control if you have if your body just has a lot of body water content, if it has a lot of stored up glycogen, stored up carbohydrates. So maybe you weigh in at a certain weight, whether it's maybe heavier for your weight or it is your true weight, but you weigh out a lot lighter. That's not something that is wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. That's how your body is handling the stress of a workout. Your body is using water to cool down your core temperature. It's using energy that you had stored up for the workout itself. That in itself is not telling anything about you as a person and whether or not you're doing something wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. Your body is responding to the workout. What we use that information for, that weight before and after you train, it gives us an idea. It just gives us an idea that you had to use and lose X amount of fluid and stored up carbohydrates in order to perform that exercise, in order to perform that training, that practice, in order to keep up with it. What you want to focus on, in addition to that change in body weight, is how you as an athlete were able to actually focus, how you were able to actually perform, how if you feel fatigued, if you feel foggy headed, if you feel headachy, if you actually feel like you are depleted, like you are done, that's more valuable information than the change of your body weight. Because on the flip side, if you feel good, if you're moving good, if you are just a star in practice and you're pumping out massively impressive reps over and over again, and you're just you're on fire and you weigh in and weigh out and it's a pretty big difference, well, functionally, you're doing well. So that just tells us, if anything, that your body just uses a lot, but that's how you use it. And this is where the individualized nature of hydration is so important, to stress that there's no reason to attach a meaning to a variable, to a range or an average. Don't attach a meaning to it. Just identify where the person's at right now, how their body is responding to the demands placed on them, and if anything, being open to the perspective that this individual may just require this different combination of things, or this individual may just be one of those, they're a unique snowflake and they just lose a lot of weight during practice, but man, they keep up with it and they're fine, cognitively. So that's just their body. So we have to, I think, remove the stigma, first of all, that we attach to, and the meaning that we attach to these different averages or measurements or metrics. It's we attach too much meaning to them. So we got to step back and look at the human being and how they're responding. Now, with that, I don't want to get too much into more of the negative stuff. But then the other thing too is looking at your your urine concentration. So I've also seen that they were using, it's called a urine specific gravity, and it's a fancy way to look at the concentration of your urine, which you can do just by looking at the color of your urine. And this was once again being used as a tool to reprimand or punish individuals as if they were doing something wrong. So again, you're not doing anything wrong. If your urine is concentrated in the morning, you're a normal human being. I can promise you that. You could be the healthiest, well-hydrated person, and if your urine is concentrated at the first time you pee in the morning, you're completely still healthy and hydrated. It has nothing to do with you as a person. That's how your body functions. That's how it works. On the flip side, if you are urinating first thing in the morning and it's already clear or really light, that's not good. You're not prepared to play because you're already showing an indication that there's too much fluid in your system that your body's trying to get rid of. So that makes it even harder to stay on top of an appropriate hydration balance during practice when we know that you're starting off in a state that really maybe isn't that well hydrated to begin with. So just a few of these examples of things that I saw real life in real time And it wasn't so much that the tools or the measurements or the metrics themselves are wrong or bad or anything. It's the fact that there was a meaning attached to them about the individual, about their lifestyle choices, about who they are as an athlete. So we want to remove that belief system that someone is somehow a bad person because their hydration status is off. Do not go down that road. If anything, you want to promote the positive side of things. You want to promote the absolute necessity to focus on hydration. And if anything, if there is anything of I don't like using scare tactics at all, but if there is ever a time to truly zero in on the potential risks of not identifying hydration, if there's ever anything to focus on, it's the fact that a change in your body weight that is as little as 1% means it's not just that your athletic performance, it's not that. It means that your actual cognitive performance declines as much as 5% right off the bat, just by a slight change in your body's hydration status. Your body's overall body water content can drop your cognitive functioning by 5%, even just the slightest change in your body water content. And as it progresses further, once you get to 2% of a body weight change because of fluid loss, because of dehydration, your cognitive performance declines. So that means your attention, your focus, your decision-making, your reaction time, your ability to regulate your emotions, all of this declines when you have just as much as a 2% body weight change in hydration status. And these variables that I'm spitting out are from research. It could very well be different based on the individual in real life application. So you could very well see someone in real life who loses 3%, 4% of body weight before and after practice. But in reality, their cognitive functioning is fine. Even their physical performance is right where it needs to be. And it's really just that their body carries extra weight. Maybe they just have extra areas where they're storing a whole lot of creatine and carbohydrate and fluid. And it could also be, like, realistically, if we talk about this, that maybe they use the restroom between this time of before and after practice. It's like there are so many layers to it. So what you want to first focus on is the cognitive functioning of the individual themselves, not specifically the body weight change, because that cognitive functioning is going to tell you a lot more about their hydration status internally versus what that external measurement is going to tell you, or what you would assume from the external measurement. So identifying and really prioritizing first the fact that there is that cognitive functioning that needs to happen. And in this case, when there's that slight change in dehydration, slight change in hydration status affecting your cognitive functioning, this is because, as I've noted in the previous episode, that your brain's sodium and potassium pumps are so prioritized that your brain requires half of the energy that it uses to be devoted solely to maintaining the sodium and potassium pumps. So your brain is using a whole lot of its energy in order to maintain the integrity of that electrolyte balance, the integrity of your nerve functions. Being able to transmit and send those signals neurologically depends on your hydration status at the cell level and from the electrolyte balance and concentrations. So your brain putting that much emphasis, that much energy towards that specific priority is precisely what we want to focus on. Less stuff about what you're peeing or not peeing, about what your body weight is doing, more focus on how you are functioning, how you are cognitively functioning. If someone is able to articulate how they're feeling in the moment, that's a much better indicator, if anything, that they are communicating well, first of all, that they're able to identify something, that's another thing, but that there's actually still that clear connection, that clear neurological function, that, like, okay, like, you're still in a good place. I want to stop for today on that note, because there's so much more that I could talk about. But this is why I get so excited, because having a multifactorial background, a varied background across different areas and seeing how they all connect is like precisely what I get so jazzed about, first of all. But it's why I get so excited to educate and explain this to others, because I know that there's never any type of curriculum out there that is teaching in this way, where you're seeing the varied, multiple areas of life that all have to coincide and coexist all at the same time. So it's amazing being a human being, right? So on that note, that was a little bit of hydration again, focusing on continuing on from what we talked about last time, and we're going to continue this discussion next time. So thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. All right, bye.